right, it should be coming up here any second. So, all right. So we are now live on YouTube for episode 38 of the podcast by Sons of Technology.
Excellent. And you know, Kyle, I think we should just go ahead and get down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got to press record on this side too, and then we are good to go. So I'll give you a countdown as soon as I hit record. All right, Joe, here we go in 3, 2, and 1.
Welcome everybody to the podcast by the Sons of Technology. And you can kind of hear by my voice, it's not as boisterous and loud as we normally are. You know, Kyle and I were talking about what we wanted to do this week, and we felt that it would not be doing our education, our educators any justice, our world any justice, if we did any other topic other than talking about what's going on in the world today. And it's because it's affecting lives, and it's always affected lives. And you know, I who am I to say anything like that coming, you know, from you know, somebody who hasn't experienced the hardships that our fellow citizens, our fellow Americans, our fellow friends, our fellow educators have experienced their entire lives, and their students are experiencing on a daily basis, and the things that we as educators are blinded by because we just don't see it and we don't know. So today, Kyle and I are, and really the rest of the Sons of Technology or the group, we need to sit back and reflect what is going on, and how can we, I don't want to say fix it, but how can we be a positive catalyst to affect change? Because we know there's no magic wand that will fix anything. You know, we can't fix what's happened in history and laws that have passed to bring people down and segregation. There's no amount of time that has passed that could change what we are and what we've felt. I just thought we needed to speak to this. So we're quickly going to do introductions, just really quickly, because we need to get down to the conversation. So I'm Joe Marquez, a member of the Sons of Technology in the EdTech Army, and we're just so happy you can join us today. And as always, our partner in innovation, Kyle Anderson, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Kyle Anderson, educator from Las Vegas, Nevada. My recent move there from Northern Nevada. So you can find me on Twitter at Anderson EdTech, my blog, AndersonEdTech.net. And like you said, Joe, it's, you know, these are really a little bit more upbeat in our demeanor and our voice when we're introducing these. But, you know, I'm with you on this one, too. And you and I had a conversation already kind of prefacing what this recording was going to be, not only just talking about what we wanted to talk about this week, but you joined Ben Dixon and I on the Beer EDU podcast that's dropping today as well, same day that this episode is going to drop. And we were talking a little bit on there about some things, and you're absolutely right. You know, coming from us, this message would not be the same. So we've got some absolutely amazing people joining us here today. So I'm just going to go around real quick, and I'll ask Ben Cogswell. He's here. Go ahead and introduce yourself real quick, please.
Hey everybody, it's good to see some familiar faces here. I'm in and out sometimes of the EdTech Army. My name is Ben Cogswell. I'm a kindergarten teacher in Salinas, California, and a father of 4 children. And I have I just grow up, I guess right now we have our mixed family. And so definitely a lot of reflecting for me with everything that's going on. But it's great to be here. Thank you guys for always having the invite open.
David, what about yourself? Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, this is David Platt. I've been a member of the EdTech Army for a little while. Haven't been able to be on a podcast for a bit. I had a shift in my role this last October, and I am now the Tech TOSA and testing coordinator at Paramount High School in Paramount, California. You can find me on Twitter at Herplatt, HERRPLATT. Have a history of 18 years of being a German teacher. And yeah, thank you very much for having us on today. And I think this is a very important topic for us to discuss.
And Phil, thanks for joining us again. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Phil Harding. I'm kind of the new member of this crazy group, and I'm the Technology Integration Specialist for the Val Verde Unified School District. I'm also a member of the Q Board of Directors, and you will find my rants, raves, and all kinds of things at my Twitter at pharding2. This topic means a lot to me because I helped refound the Val Verde High School continuation school about 20 years ago. And I think a lot of these issues as a staff, we were small and we were able to really tackle and take a different look at those issues we're going to discuss today. I also grew up back east where it's a little bit different take because, believe it or not, I had families that fought on both sides of the Civil War. And it was always interesting growing up when you had to go from Indianapolis down south for a visit, right? During the 1960s, during everything that was happening with civil rights. It really opened your eyes. It's a lot different.
Thank you, Phil. And I'm so happy to have two members of the EdTech Army here that we haven't had on before, but they graciously made time to make an episode. And I want to introduce somebody that's been near and dear to my heart for quite some time. You may know her on the Twitters as the Savvy Educator. So Savvy, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Right, first on mute, right? Hey everyone, my name is Jornay Armand, and as Joe mentioned, you may know me as Savvy Educator on Twitter. That kind of sticks a little bit more for a lot of people. So I'm so glad that we're here having this conversation. For those who may not know me, I will always be an educator 24/7, always looking for ways that I can be a part of teaching and learning. I have one of my awesome innovator fellows here with me. I was Ben's educator coach during his Google Innovation Academy, which is kind of cool. And Joe and I have had lots of interactions over the years as well. But currently I am one of the educator innovation leads on Team Flipgrid. And so for those of you who may not know about Flipgrid, it is a video-based discussion platform. And what a better way to have students discuss these issues at hand than by using technology. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Joe, for the invite.
Absolutely.
And Kyle, and everyone else.
And everybody. And Doctor, you may be thinking, well, am I really a member of the EdTech Army? Yes, because we don't ever have guests on this show. We have members. And so if you didn't know, you've officially been inducted into the EdTech Army. So this is your induction ceremony right here. Will you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Tutul Ntoya. I am a consultant now, and I'm working with a few districts around STEAM and STEAM innovation and creating maker spaces and really creating authentic experiences for all of our students. And when David reached out to me about this topic, and David and I, we've been running into each other for the past couple of years, and I was so excited that he invited me, and I'm here. Let me know what waivers I need to sign, and it's all good.
Well, we thank you just so much for joining, and we really strive to make sure that the voices on these podcasts are voices of passionate educators, voices of experts in our topic, and people that just want to see education move in a positive direction. And with everything going on, I just want to remind everybody of the credo that the Sons of Technology live by, the onus that we try to emulate every single day. And this is a Bible verse. This is from 1 Thessalonians 5:11. And it says, "You are the sons of light and the daughters of day. So speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope. So we'll all be in this together. No one left out, no one left behind. I know you're already doing this. Just keep on doing
Go
it."
back, watch TV.
And that is exactly what we are trying to do today. And the things that we see on TV and social media and everything going on right now, I just feel that passage means more than just what we believe in. I think it's something that we really need to strive as citizens, as people, to live up to, because there's too much divide in this country, whether it's political or racial or what have you. And as educators, we look at our students, we look at our kids as the future, right? We look at them as they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. They're going to be the ones making a difference. And we get to be on the ground floor of that. And the important thing to understand is that we have an obligation to make sure that they understand that nobody is better than anybody else. Nobody. I don't care your status. I don't care where you come from. Nobody is better than anybody else. And I make sure my students know that about myself as well. I make sure first day of class, I always said, I am no better than you. The only reason that I'm up here and you're in those seats is because I know more about science than you do. If this was a skateboarding class, I would be in that seat and one of you would be up here. There is nobody that's more important in the classroom. We are all equals and we're all going to learn together. And we just have to make sure we understand that. But I also felt that, Jake Miller mentioned this to us, and he said that we can't do this topic any justice if it's just us talking. We needed to bring in some EdTech Army members that understand the topic of maybe invisible racism on campuses or unintentional racism in society. And we need to bring those to attention. And before we pass it over, I just want to say that, one of the things that really resonated with me this week was there was a post on Twitter that says, when was the first time you had your first Black teacher? And I thought, oh, second grade, that's good. And then I thought, but then never again. Never again. That was crazy to me. And then I thought to myself, as a teacher, how many Black colleagues did you have? And I realized it was 0. And then the same for my administration. And then I thought, how did I not realize that? How did I not see that? How did I not even, how come that didn't even affect me? And then I thought about the students on campus who have no authority figures, nobody to look up to that resembles them. And I thought to myself, how sad is that to go onto a campus and nobody reflects you? And that hurt, because then it starts putting into perceptions of, why did we not realize that? And how does that affect kids' psyche growing up? Right. So I just wanted to start that conversation and just ask the group, what are your thoughts on this? Right. Think when did you have your first Black educator? When did you first understand this stuff? Ben, I saw that you had something to say.
I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever had one. Remember growing up, I always felt like I was an oddball, but anyways, that's a different story. There was one little Black girl in my class. Her name was Maya. And I just remember kind of how everybody treated her. And it really it didn't seem right to me. And I don't know, just I struggle with this a lot as a white Anglo-Saxon male, and I feel like, that realization, Joe, you had, like, I remember for me thinking about the white privilege, and honestly, I'm just really starting to be comfortable starting to talk about it. I saw a post on Facebook, and it was just a line of white women all locked in arms, in between police and Black protesters. And that really put it in so much perspective for me. Just all of a sudden, like, I felt like it was a really big light bulb that went off for me. And just saying the fact that, like, that's for me, that's white privilege. And just understanding the fact that those people can stand there, right, and be comfortable doing that. And so I don't know, I get a lot of goosebumps talking about it, and it definitely makes me real emotional, because it is really uncomfortable for me. And I just find myself, starting to feel like I am finding my voice a little bit around the topic. And so I still have a lot to learn. But I definitely, I think there's a lot of people that are in my situation that are just really starting to figure out, you know, how they feel comfortable speaking about it, and just learning that it is like, you know, I always kind of, I heard what you said, like about at the beginning, like, what do I have to say about it? You know, what perspective do I have? And I felt like that for a really long time. What do I have to say? I'm just like a white man in privilege. But just seeing that said, you know, what can I do about it? I can say something, right? Whatever that's going to be, I just have to start saying something. If it's big or if it's small, where does it start? And that's just that starting point is going to be different for each of us.
You know, and you know, saying something can be hard because it can be difficult to put into words what we mean. And I'm glad you brought up the word privilege, right? You said white privilege, but people take the word privilege and they look at it wrong, right? Like a white person would say, "What do you mean privilege? I wasn't given anything. I worked hard. I wasn't this." That's not what privilege means. Francesca Ramsey puts it this way. She goes, "Privilege means you never have to think about a situation that other people have to think about." And one of her examples was, she goes, 34 states in these United States have no law protecting gay people, meaning if a boss wants to fire them, they can, and there's no repercussions. We don't have to think about that because that's not our persuasion, right? And so when we're talking about privilege, it means we don't have to be fearful of driving down the street and just being pulled over, right? We don't have to be fearful that we're walking into a store and have somebody follow us because we think we're up to no good. We don't have to think that way. That's what they mean by privilege, not based upon status and based upon money. It's based upon you don't have to think differently about your normal day like some other people do. That's what privilege means. And we have to think of it that way because too many people defend that I don't have white privilege. I work for everything I got. That's not what we're talking about. And we have to make sure people understand that because it takes away from the content of the word privilege into a different realm. And we need to make sure that's understood.
Joe, I appreciate you throwing that out there, but Jornay, you've been just nodding along, and I can tell you've got something that you want to add to this. So please share with us what your thoughts are right now.
Well, and I'm sitting outside right now, so excuse if you hear any background noises, but I think Joe like hit it on the head, and just reflecting on what Ben was saying as well as Joe, as myself as an African American female, you know, there are some things throughout life that I had to do that my white colleagues never had to do, and you know, unfortunately, it became a norm for me. That doesn't make it right in any type of way. But something as simple as, you know, we're all ed tech enthusiasts, but if we all apply for, you know, a spot to present at a conference or something like that, you know, there could be some things that are looked over based upon race, unfortunately. Sometimes it could be a name. Sometimes it could be you're sitting in the session room and people think you are not the presenter because of the race that you are. And I mentioned to one of my colleagues this week, just as we were in talks, I said, you know, a lot of times you may see me with like a little blazer or something over my, you know, ed tech shirt or something. Well, that's so other people take me seriously, because other than that, they may not take me seriously. And it's little things like that that I feel that I know I personally, as an African American female, think about all the time. How am I going to be portrayed? Am I going to be looked at as a professional? Am I going to be treated the same ways? And it is not right whatsoever. And I think, you know, to what Ben was, you know, getting at, you know, we can't really control you know, the areas like in which we live and the situations that we're in, but as educators, I think we have a huge commitment to not only ourselves, but to the children that we are teaching every single day, to provide them with diverse experiences. And with technology, there is no excuse in 2020 for students not to learn from others who do not live near them, who do not look like them. There's no excuse for students not to be able to read diverse books, because that's how you learn, right? And if only one narrative is shown to kids and taught to kids, that's what they're going to grow up believing. And, you know, I am a firm believer in connections. The more you have conversations with others, the closer you get with them, and you develop something called empathy. And I truly feel that my colleagues who work alongside me every day are willing to listen to those experiences that I have. And it becomes easier for them to start recognizing when those things happen either to me or to someone else. And I think that's the one challenge for everyone. Like, we all have something called bias, right? And it's kind of like innate in all of us, but you have a choice also whether to act on that bias or not. Okay. And so I think what's happening in our world right now is that there's situations where people are acting upon their bias. And granted, these things are being made public. And right now we're in a situation where everybody is at home. You know, you're not really in that day-to-day busyness. And so you focus on it a little bit more, and you see things a little bit differently because you have the time to do so. So I think this is a real critical point in America's history. Hopefully it is a turning point. I know there's so many other situations that have happened, but I think because of the point of time that we're in right now, it's allowing us to deal with this and not just move on, but deal with it in a way to really uncover all of those wounds that we've had as a society and as a nation for over 400 years of not recognizing African Americans as humans. It was written in our Constitution, you know, you know, we went through segregation, all of these things where we did not have the rights as someone else that's simply a human just because of the color of our skin. And so I'm proud that I'm on this webinar today talking about this, because I know this is a sign, just as many others are having conversations right now, that that we're ready to deal with the issue at hand and make some changes. And it takes an inward look. You know, I think about that Michael Jackson song, Looking at the Man in the Mirror, right? And that's the hardest part, to face yourself and think about, how have I played a part in all of this? What could I have done differently? And it's okay to say, you know what, maybe I added to that, or you know, it's okay to have that reflection and say, you know what, I'm going to make changes. You know, I don't agree with this anymore, and I'm going to make changes to make things better, not only for, you know, the students that I'm working with now, but for everyone else that is either around me or really our entire world, because we all are those sons and daughters. You know, we all are humans. And so I believe that is our duty to just understand the struggles of just anyone and everyone, and do our part in order to alleviate those things and make our society a better place to be.
You know, I love what you were talking about, of even if you feel in the past you were a part of the problem, that you can still make a difference now, right? Because one of the hardest things to do in the world is to change, or one of the hardest things in the world to do is to admit you were wrong. And so if you change, that means you're admitting something. And what we want to make sure people understand is that if you want to speak up, if you want to say something about this, if you feel something is wrong, you should speak up. The easiest thing in the world is to be silent. That's the easiest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is speak up, maybe even against your peers. I had the great opportunity to listen to Ken Shelton today on the Wakelet podcast, and he did a phenomenal job. I mean, absolutely great. I love him to death. And he had a question of a teacher who from the South, and she goes, I want to speak up, but I fear retribution from the administrators, because that's the culture that they live in. And so we completely understand everybody lives in a different town, a different city with a different culture. But right is right. It doesn't matter where you live. Right is right. And you have an obligation to speak up. And to me, it always goes back to, as a science teacher, I always admired John Thomas Scopes from the Scopes trial, where he said, I'm going to teach evolution because that's science, and I'm going to teach it. And the law in Tennessee at the time was, you can't do that. And he felt right was right, and I'm going to teach it regardless. And, he was arrested and he was taken to trial, and he ended up losing. But he spoke up. And the hardest thing to do is to put yourself in that situation. But once again, right is right. And history remembers those that step out of line, right? History does not remember the people who do the same thing the other person did. They remember people who take a risk and step out of line. And it's our turn to step out of line.
I think just real quick adding there, I think, for me, and I think some other people, I think one of the things is figuring out how to speak up. And so I think if you're out there and you're listening, you just have to start small, right? Whether it's just, I mean, I feel a lot of guilt. And if I can start to admit that, right, I just got to start somewhere. And I think that's for me, is figuring out how, and each of us finding our voice. So just start small and start somewhere.
Yeah. And Jornay, one thing that really resonated with me that you were saying too, is that in the age that we're in now, with all the technology, there's really not an excuse to not know and to be better informed and be more compassionate. So Ben, you were talking earlier about how the town where you grew up, I grew up in a very similar town. 97% of my hometown is white. And, there, out of my high school of 2000, there was probably less than 20 kids that were of African-American descent. And I can definitely remember tensions at times as well. And luckily I was raised in a family that was a lot more compassionate, empathetic, and accepting of all people. But I didn't have any Black teachers, and even in college, I can't think of any Black teachers I had in college. Even I had coaches when I played football that were Black, but I can't think of any teachers. And then what really started to shift my mindset a lot was when I moved into the dorms, and my roommate was a Black man from the city of Saginaw, Michigan, me from rural Alpena, Michigan. And, it was one of those things that right off the bat, we didn't try to do this whole, we don't see color or anything like that. We knew we were different. Like, I'm a white male from rural Michigan. You're a Black male from urban Michigan. We knew we were different, but we accepted each other. We learned from one another, and we are family now. Like his son, who was born shortly after we moved in together, that's my nephew. Okay. And now I have his daughter is my little niece, and then he has another young son now that I've yet to meet in person. But those are my nephews and nieces right there. And I'm very fortunate in that regard. But a lot of kids growing up in those kinds of situations like me, they're not as fortunate to be able to interact with people on a face-to-face. But with technology, again, there's no excuse. You can interact with people of different races, different cultures now because of that, and you can learn. And it's up to us as educators to really make sure that's happening as well, because not only was I in a town where I was not amongst others that were different from me, but I didn't learn about things like Tulsa and Rosewood or what Juneteenth was or anything like that until I got to college, and I pretty much learned it on my own. So we as teachers, that is an obligation we have in order to help make this, I don't want to say transition, to help us to move forward and to learn from one another. It starts with us is basically what I'm trying to say.
And Doctor, I see you shaking your head quite a bit. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I mean, you work in a field with students and STEM and technology. And as we're saying, technology you know, is used by everyone. I just want to hear your thoughts on everything that's been said and even more.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about, a couple of things I was thinking about when everyone was talking was, relationships. And a lot of Americans, don't have relationships with people of different ethnicities. That's just what it is. If you're fortunate enough to live in, you know, a multicultural city like LA or New York, maybe Miami, there's some other big cities, it might be easier for that to happen. But the majority of us live in homogeneous environments. So you never run into anyone who is Black. You never run into anyone who's African or someone who might be Indian or Malaysian or some of these other ethnicities. So you know what you know, and you don't get that experience of knowing someone like face to face. So your only experience is what you might see on TV, unfortunately. And if you've never grown up with a Black person and you grew up in small town America, wherever it is you grew up, you're only going to know what you see on TV, and that's going to, or hear on the radio, or whatever the case may be, and that might kind of cloud your judgment on how people live and how people really are. So those relationships are really important. And I keep hearing over and over again how much being involved in groups, being involved in sports, being involved in some of these other things allowed you access to other people who come from different backgrounds, and opened up your eyes to what the possibilities are and what other people are feeling. So if your roommate keeps talking about, the cops bug me again, the cops bug me again, you're like, wow, that really happens. Like, yeah, what do you mean? I was making it up, right? And so when these things happen, you're like, oh man, that's kind of messed up. My roommate went through it. His friends went through it. I had to, rally with, all that stuff. So that's the experience you get. But if you've never been around anyone is, who, anyone who has, different background than you do, then, it's really hard for you to kind of empathize. And I had a second thought and I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Oh, in terms of technology, just like Jornia was saying, there's no reason now that you can't really be in authentic relationships with people of different ethnicities through Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever the social media um, platform is. It's out there. The conversations are out there, and I think we have to be courageous enough to go into those conversations and say, I may not know, but I want to learn and I want to have an authentic relationship. Because a lot of what's happening now, what's happening recently, people are having a hard time trying to relate to it. But if you know someone and you know someone who's gone through it and you know how they're feeling about it, it's easier for you to kind of inject yourself in the conversation and know what the real issue is. I think a lot of people are having a hard time knowing what the real issue is, um, because you don't have those conversations. And if you don't have those conversations, who are you leaning on to really educate you and catch you up to speed on what the issue is? And I remember what I want to talk about, co-conspirators. And I did a boom at Q about co-conspirators. And I like using co-conspirators because right now we need not so much allies, because, allies are cool, but, when the school day is done, you can go back home to your house, to your family, right? You don't have to be immersed in it. But when you're a co-conspirator, you're putting something on the line because you understand that I just can't sit and be, and I think Joe, you were saying this, I just can't be quiet about this. I just can't go by and let this happen day after day, year after year. I have to do something about it. And me doing something about it might mean that I have to step back, might mean that I might have to sacrifice, might mean the group of us have to sacrifice. But in that sacrifice, we're able to bring those people who have no voice into the situation where they now have a voice. But that might mean that I might not get the keynote this time, but someone else gets the keynote. That's even better. Or, we have a long line of white administrators. We've never had a Black administrator. Let's find a good qualified Black administrator who can come into this space and lend their voice. We've never had a woman principal. Maybe we should step back and look to see if we can put a woman principal to give their perspective. So I think those things are really important when we talk about this conversation.
No, I love the fact you started this talking about the differences in locales, right? You said in cities you may have the ability to meet and talk to people from all over, and in small towns you may just have your small town. And I think, you know, this is where Flipgrid really comes into a play, right? Grid guides, grid pals, being able to have teachers connect with students from different areas, because perspective is absolutely key. Could you imagine a school in California teaching about the Civil War and a school in the South talking about the Civil War, and then having those kids talk about the experience and what they've learned? What are their takeaways from it? Because let's face it, different textbooks teach things in different ways. Different areas adopt different things because of different ways the verbiage is in the textbooks. Different people's, the way they grew up gives them a different mindset, so they may turn that into the way they teach, right? This systemical way of perpetuating an idea is generational, right? I mean, think about the Civil War was 150 years ago plus. Civil rights era was only 50 years ago plus. It's not enough time to change a generational mind, because you have a grandfather talking to your father who talks to you, and you just have this same idea being passed down. And if you stay isolated and you don't open yourself up to the global community, you don't know any better, or you may know any better, but you just don't change because of that isolation. And I think this goes back to ISTE standards. The ISTE standards that they put out for students are phenomenal, because they're talking about the empowered learner, the student who learns on their own. They don't take things at face value. They look at different resources and different facts, and they become that empowered learner. They become that digital citizen who you can't just say whatever you want on social media. You can't just say, you have freedom of speech, and part of freedom of speech is learning when to keep your mouth shut, right? Or to say things differently. And one of my favorite, global collaborator. You're not alone, and your mindset is not alone. You can learn with everybody else. And I used to always tell my students this. They go, how come you didn't sit me with my friend? How come blah, blah, blah? How come you? I go, listen, outside of this classroom, you hang out with people that are like-minded individuals. Inside this classroom, you will learn with individuals who are different-minded individuals. That is how you are going to grow as a person. And that is how I'm going to put you into groups, not with your friends, but with people that you should learn about. And I think that's key. That's absolutely key, because we're a community of amazing people. And Kyle, I think you hit it on the head with your friend Brandon. You wouldn't have known him until you were with him, and now you love him like a brother. And people have to realize that. It's my grandpa used to always tell me, he goes, the only thing you should judge people on is their character and work ethic. That's it. And he was a manager of a large corporation, and he said that because he only had an 8th grade education. And he ended up becoming a manager of a large industry. And he says, I'm going to hire people who are going to work hard and have good character. I want them to tell me the truth. I want them to tell me not what I want to know, but what's going to make me better as a person. Those are the people I want to hire. And so the people you should be friends with are people of good character, right? Of good character. That's all that really matters, right? Good character. And I'm gravitated towards each and every one of you because of your character, because of the way you act online, because of the way you help people, because of the way you want to lift up education. That's what I mean. Your heart, your character, that's what makes people. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. And it hurts my heart. It absolutely hurts my heart when I see students making assumptions of people because of the way they look, right? And you know, from California, we get a lot of English language learners, and they're trying to push into classes and speak English, and when they talk, of course, they don't have English down 100%, and people laugh because they think, oh, you must be dumb because you can't. No, I say, how about you speak Spanish, right? Because it's not about that, right? I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say it just hurts my heart when people don't get to know each other and they just make assumptions of somebody because of one thing they see or one thing they hear. It hurts me because we need our students to be better, which means
Let
we
me
need ourselves to be better. I've talked enough. I want somebody else to talk because I just get so emotional with this because
And Joe, you made an interesting point in talking about curriculum and what we're teaching, and what perspective are we teaching it from. And I think that's one thing that if there's nothing else you can do, if you don't know what else to do, we need to drill down on our curriculum, look and see what perspective we're teaching from. And if we're not teaching from the perspective of people of color, then how do we inject that into? And it's not just one unit in February where we talk about, you know, one maybe, African American, whoever who did whatever, and we do it for Black History Month. But like in totality, how do we look at people of color and not just look at our curriculum from a white male perspective, and looking at it from different people who experienced it, for the first time in my life, when I was an administrator at a charter school. There was a Spanish teacher who was teaching about the War of 1812, Spanish American War of 1812, but she was speaking about it from the Mexican people's perspective, and the stories, and kind of the things that people had to do, and the places that people had to hide, and where the kids had to hide, and how they can still educate the kids even though there's a war going on, right? And I never got that perspective, so I was kind of blown away at the stories that I was hearing her tell to the students, and the perspective they were getting. And I'm not sure how much of that is happening at our schools. So those of you who are going to be watching, and that is a question: how do we take what we're teaching? How do we take the curriculum that we're teaching, and how do we take it from the perspective of the people of color and how they're experiencing this? Because that's a whole other side of the curriculum that we don't even touch, and unfortunately we never get to learn that.
I think there's I don't know if you've seen this YouTube video. Somebody takes like all the books in their library and they have it all on a wall, and it's just like a bunch of kind of kids books, and they start pulling out books like, okay, let's look at books that are kind of, I'm going to remove all the books that are kind of by white, male characters. Let's take all of those books out. And they started like really looking at the libraries, like how many books do we have with female characters in them? How many books do we have, with people of color in them? How many books do we have with, families that have two dads or two moms? And so they started pulling these books out, and you see this video and you see over time, like it's not very many. And so I feel like for me, that's one place I always start, especially as like a kindergarten teacher. I look at my library and I say, what are the books that I'm putting out for kids, right? I put out some of the classics, like, the Disney princess books, because that's what little girls want. They love Pete the Cat. I'm going to put Pete the Cat out, right? Because that's what they want. But I'm also going to think some of the other books that I'm putting out as well, right? And I think that's an easy place for us to start, whether it's inside or outside of the curriculum. What do I have in front of me, right? Even if it's just with kids' books, right? What do I have in front of me? How can I add to that? And how can I make it more meaningful? Because again, Tatui, I had a college teacher that taught me about the perspective of the Aztecs as, Cortez was coming, right? And just, it's really important for us to open those minds. And so for me, I guess that's a tip or something I think that all of us could do, is just, even if it's with our own family and we have kids at home, what books do we have for them? Right. And just start looking and start having some of those conversations. There's some great books lists going on right now. So I just think that, whatever we can do, we got to do that as teachers. And if that means going out for me and purchasing a few extra books for my classroom, well, then that's kind of what I got to do. Right.
It's definitely a start. And I highly encourage any educators to rally with their colleagues to start having what I call these courageous conversations, and to really look at practices within schools, and take a deep look inside and see if the practices are right, fair, and just to all students. One protocol I absolutely love, I use it in probably every aspect of education that I was ever in, is the 5 whys. You have a situation, you ask why, Then you ask why 5 more times to get down to the root of it. And I think for so long, we have not gotten down to the root of why we have certain issues. So if you have, let's say there's behavior issues with certain populations within schools, we already have data that shows that African-American males are suspended way more often than any other groups of students. It's the, basically the school to prison type pipeline, right? And so when we start to kind of unveil where our bias is starting to be acted upon and how it is affecting our children, like we are creating the problems that we are having in society because of that. And so it does take work, in schools need to carve out time for faculty to talk about these issues, to face themselves within and as a collective unit as well, right? And so I love the notion of collective efficacy, because when educators feel that they are supported by one another, that they are growing and learning together with one another, it becomes a little easier and fear does not get in the way. And so we mentioned a little earlier, people may not say something because they are going to fear what's going to happen to them. So whether it is a person of color fearing to speak up for themselves because they fear that they're going to lose their job or not get any other type of advancing opportunities, or if it's one of maybe their white colleagues who may not speak up in fear that they may be turned against or looked at in a different way. That fear needs to be removed, and the only way that it can be removed is if we do have these open and honest conversations. And yes, it will hurt a little bit. That's the whole point of it. That's what I call, in education, we call that the stretch zone, right? When it comes to learning, you have that productive struggle, but guess what? It's going to be a beautiful rainbow on the other side. So, let's jump in, let's get uncomfortable real quick. And in that uncomfortable, moment, that's where the beauty is going to happen. And I promise schools who make the efforts to do that, they will see changes. One thing that I absolutely love about working for Flipgrid is that basically you can use Flipgrid for anything. But at the beginning of the school year, there were so many educators who simply used Flipgrid to learn their students' names. Part of your name is also your identity. So if you start with that and you start truly getting to know not only students, their names, their backgrounds, but also their experiences, you see a different side. And because of this COVID-19 remote learning situation that we're all in now, what I have been noticing on social media is educators who had been with their children for over 6 months in the school year communicating, I know them a little bit better now. They see inside of their homes. They see, who their siblings are, their parents that maybe they did not see before. And so that becomes another step closer to someone else. It is the relationship, it is the connection. And so I truly believe if we make that commitment to know our students and know their experiences and their families' experiences and truly try to put ourselves in each other's shoes, then we can start to make lasting strides that I think will make our world a better place. I have 2 daughters, they're 10 and they're 7. And I hope some of the experiences I have will never be their experience. But I tell you, I fear that. I fear it all the time. And, no parent should have to fear how their children is going to be treated just because of the way that they look, okay, or maybe the choices that they make, and so I hope that every educator out there sees the children in their classroom as their own. Once you start seeing children as your own children, you look at things in a different light anyway. So yeah, it's really difficult work, but necessary work that needs to happen. And I think each of you that's on this call here is a catalyst for that change, and the people that you surround yourself with can also be a catalyst, and then it becomes this ripple effect. Yeah, I can go on all day about these things, but I just wanted to point out that, you know, number one, just the simple protocol of asking why 5 times to get to the root of whatever problems are going on, and then making those connections through genuine and authentic relationships, and utilizing technology in any way that you possibly can to open up the world to students, so that they can see, you know, what it's like to live in another part of the world, maybe the struggles that other people in other countries are dealing with, or even within their own country. Maybe just a few miles down the road could be a different living situation than what they're experiencing at that moment in time. Yeah, I'm going to pass it off to somebody else. I would love to hear what I haven't heard from David. I know you've been thinking over there. What's going on in your mind?
Oh my goodness. A lot of different thoughts. So, I'm going to go back to something that Ben said, and he said, you know, starting small. And this we have an opportunity, for a lot of us are parents, and a lot of us have kids that are nice, young, impressionable ages. And we had the opportunity in the last few days to be able to start small and have an educated discussion with our 10-year-old and with our 14-year-old about what white privilege really meant, and to give them examples of what white privilege meant in our own neighborhood. And as Joe said, you know, things that we don't have to think about when we're going out. We don't have to think about in our neighborhood, if we're going to go out and taking a walk, is not the same perspective that a black man is going to have to think about on taking a walk in our very own neighborhood. And to be able to have that discussion with our kids is very, very important, and to try to get them to be part of the bigger discussion, so that they can then lend their voice to that. So that was one of the thoughts I had, besides all the amazing things.
Yeah, you know, David, I think one of the important things is accepting that there is white privilege, accepting that, you know, there are things that happen in our society that me as a white person benefit from, and because I'm benefiting, other people may not benefit as much, and it may even be detrimental to others, right? Like, that's, to me, that's the first piece. If we can get that common ground and accept that, because then we can build a conversation from that. But can I interject real quick? Go ahead. I want to. So, just for me, that I think this is helpful. Okay, I'm a white man, right? And so I don't know where to start, right? This is just an example for everybody. Where do you think I start? What should I do? What should I start? How can I start? So accepting first, I think. Accepting, right? That this is real. This is a thing, that I have privilege, and then kind of, you know, open your eyes to it. What is it? What does that look like? Does it look like, you know, me getting preferential treatment on, you know, job applications, because it happens? Is it me walking into a store and not having to worry about somebody following me? Is it when I drive down the street and there's a police, I'm not the one who's going to be, you know, have the police follow, right? Like those kind of things. That's the first piece of it. And then the second, I think the step after that is, now let's start having conversations, like real conversations about race and how it shows up in my circles, how it shows up in where I work, where I live, the conversations that maybe my friends have. Maybe my friends have these conversations that are a little uncomfortable, but I've never said anything in the past. And I think that's important, right? I mean, like Jornay said, I mean, I feel totally uncomfortable speaking about it. I still feel uncomfortable speaking about it, right? But I feel like I got to start somewhere. And so I just think what you said, it is uncomfortable. Racism is uncomfortable, right? If I'm not, and I have to realize it's way more uncomfortable for somebody that's not in my shoes, right? Way more uncomfortable. So if the least thing I can do is like get some sweaty palms,
qualms and get a little shivery, right? I need to start, right? And so I just
Yeah.
think that adds to your point.
Yeah.
And Ben, just to kind of piggyback that, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. It is uncomfortable to talk about these things, but not talking about them is just as dangerous as those that are blatantly bigoted and racist. So
Because I got some
about
deep-seated issues, probably like you. I didn't even realize all these issues I have until I start talking about them, right?
yeah, and not talking about it, like I said, to me is just as dangerous because you're basically by not talking, it's accepting the status quo, and nothing's going to change if we don't talk about these things. And like I said, I've got a long way to go and a lot of things to learn as well. And I love this conversation that we're having right now. And you know, and Phil, I see you've been sitting back patiently as well, and I know you've got some things to say here too that you've been contributing to our little side chat on here, and I would love to hear your thoughts too.
Well, you know, it's a variety of thoughts like you, Kyle. I grew up in a blue collar town and outside of Indianapolis that was 98% white. Never seeing I remember seeing my first black teacher in third grade, Mrs. Word, and she was just amazing teacher and great to us kids. But growing up too, I got put in out of the Liberty Township. We got put into what was called the Great Society School, because it had the poor kids in town with the farm kids, right, from Liberty Township. And that is where I would encounter my first friends that were not white, that were either African American or they were Filipino. And one of the little girls one day in second grade is still one of my best friends, Kathy Archie. Kathy come up to me and said, "Hey, did you know you and I are brother and sister?" Well, that was a shock. And I remember going home saying to my mom, "Hey, Mom, Kathy Archie said we're related." And my mom started laughing and said, "Well, Kathy's mom and I were in the same birthing room at the hospital. And we've been good friends ever since." And that's how my mom put it. And Kathy and I still laugh about it. We kid each other. I said, "Yeah, my longtime sister, Kathy Archie." But you also have to realize in the late 1960s, everything that was going on, even as a kid, you see it around you, right, growing up. And I remember a family trip down south, and I'll never forget, down in the deep south, seeing whites only can drink from this fountain, blacks can only drink from this fountain. And I remember asking my brother to explain that to me. And my brother's several years older than me. And we were talking about this in the last week, kind of a family memory. You know, I said, "Hey, Jeff, do you remember?" And he said, "Yeah." And he was talking about how he explained it to me at the time. He said, "You know, that means down here that Kathy and Meredith and Jeff and all the kids we grew up with can't go drink from that fountain." And I thought that was just terrible. And I turned to my dad and said to my dad, who was a World War II veteran, I said, "Dad, how can that be? That's not what you guys fought for, you know?" And Dad said, "Well, we'll talk about that when we get back home, you know." And the thing was, growing up in back east, it's a little bit different because people, I feel, out west don't know what the Civil War was. I found teaching students over there in history and so on, they had no idea the cultural part of it. Jimmy Carter this week, I don't know if you saw his letter today that he put out from the Carter Center. And he says, listen, Jimmy Carter says in his letter, he says, "We've been discussing this in government and institutions since 1960s, and we still have not done enough work." And here's, you know, the elderly former president saying, "I'm ashamed that we haven't brought it further than we have." And I don't know, it's just a different kind of perspective when you grow up with it, and it opens your eyes. And I know when Valverde High School, Joe, you've been to Valverde High School, where we've done amazing things and won awards from the state. We took that school over, a group of us in the late 90s. We were volunteer teachers, 5 of us, with a young administrator who had never been a principal before. And we took over a school that had had a riot. And it was really a Hispanic riot, but we also had, you know, our Afro-American kids in there too. And we found that by setting, like Jorna was talking about, we had a certain standard for everybody, right? And we put those standards in place, and we treated every kid as an equal. And you know what? We had the greatest time of our lives. And now it's become an amazing place, an amazing school. It's won tons of awards. And I can say that I grew so close to those kids. And it's really taking time with them and getting to know them. It's like Doc was talking about. You use that technology to reach them. You use other methods to get to reach them. I'll never forget the faculty basketball game that I went out, and here's a short guy like myself playing these big kids, right? And I come out bloodied from it, I'll have to admit. But I'll tell you what, the respect out of that game was something else. And, you know, there's so much to how you're born into it and how you grew up in learning. I think it was Ben that said how much his attitude changed when we moved from Colorado to California. And one of the things I'm proud of my girls is the fact they grew up in California, where you can experience 100 different cultures, you know. And I'm thinking, gee, I grew up experiencing, luckily, maybe 2. Anyway, don't want to rant and rave.
I mean, I just can't. I just imagine being a Colorado boy in a very, as I mentioned, not very diverse, and then walking down in California and in San Francisco and seeing 2 men holding their hands for the first time. And just like, again, just those eye-opening experiences. And it goes to all these facts that we got to expose people to differences, right? We got to do it in multiple ways, right? We got to get into our curriculum. We got to start having conversations, right? It's our duty, right? It's our duty when we see these things, right? We're educators, right? We're educating the next generation. And if we're not speaking with passion about it, and if we're not, you know, obviously, you know, we want to be the best to do it and serve justice and, you know, and provide those resources for our kids. And so I just think whatever we can do to help open up people's eyes in a respectful way, in a kind way, and just know that, hey, we are all like, you know, like you said, Phil, we are brothers and sisters, right? Because when it comes down to it, we're all born, you know, the same way, right? We all have the same thing in our veins. We may look different and have different experiences and different backgrounds, but, you know, we are very different, but we are all the same.
Absolutely right. And we have to also make people understand that, you know, people have said, you know, why is everybody so angry right now? Why is everything happening right now? It's not happening right now. It's been building up, right? We try to pretend it doesn't exist. Oh, it doesn't. Racism doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. We can't pretend bias doesn't exist. It's like a volcano. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to start erupting. We have to make sure that we can tamp down that pressure by admitting the existence of this. And we also have to admit to ourselves there are things that we do as educators that perpetuates this, right? Because when we get to know our students, how many times are we told by another teacher, oh, you're getting that student? Or I want to tell you about this student or that. You're already getting this preconceived notion of a student before you've even met them, because a colleague has done that. And I used to tell my fellow colleagues, my fellow teachers, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know anything. And I tell my students right off the bat, I don't care what happened last year. I don't care about your grade last year. I don't care if you got an A, an F. I don't care. This is a chance to change who you are. I'm gonna make you the best that you can possibly be. I'm not coming in with any assumptions about you. You're not coming in with any assumptions about me. If you want to start from scratch, this is your chance to start from scratch. And we also have to stop making assumptions about actions in the class. I tore myself up because there was a student who constantly didn't do his work, constantly wasn't getting his work done. And I kept thinking, you're just being defiant. You're being defiant. You're being defiant. And one day I went to him again, look, stay after class. We have to talk. And I said, why are you not doing your work? Am I not giving you enough information? Am I not giving you enough time? And he goes, do you want to know the truth, Mr. Marquez? I go, yes. I don't know what I'm doing. So I can sit here and pretend that I know what I'm doing, and you can come by and say I'm doing it wrong. Or I can act like I'm not going to do it, and then you can get mad at me. Either way, I get an F. I would rather not. That hurt, because that means I'm making an assumption that he's not doing it for one reason, and the reason was because he didn't understand, and the way that he reacted was the way that he thought he should react. And so
And
we
you
said,
did exactly what Tatul said, was start with a conversation, right?
yep,
Ask.
And so what did I do? I used technology. And what I did was, instead of, and it was reading articles and asking them to highlight this and that, and I assumed they knew how to do that. I didn't teach it, and that's one thing. I don't assume as a teacher that another teacher has taught them. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to start using some tools that allows collaboration. And I told that student, I go, listen, if you don't understand the article, I want you to watch what the other students are doing, and all I want you to do is comment on their comments, something that they said that helped you understand them more. And then I said, and then over time, if you feel comfortable, you can start doing it as well. And by the end of the year, that student was highlighting and leaving comments and speaking up in class, because he was able to become empowered by himself to learn how to do something. He took it upon himself to be empowered. I can't make assumptions. We can't make assumptions. We can't let other teachers make assumptions. We cannot let that happen. And that's part of the problem. And people may not even recognize it, right? One experience from one teacher does not mean that's going to be the experience. Maybe that student is just waiting for that teacher to finally give a spark, finally give him meaning, finally give him a chance to see how education can better their life. Maybe they just need a friend. Maybe they just need a teacher who's willing to listen, right? Maybe they've been scorned by teachers and they don't trust them. Maybe you get a chance to be that teacher they trust and turn their view of education around. We have that opportunity, but we have to stop making assumptions.
I think a good phrase for that is to say, I am on your side. And I had that conversation with a student just last summer, and it was a student coming into the high school who was notorious in the junior high, and then her siblings were all notorious for having trouble. And I told her, I said, look, I'm on your side. And she looked at me and said, no teacher's ever told me that before.
And as we're wrapping things up here, I want to take a moment to say that going into this, Joe and I were talking, we were both excited but anxious at the same time for this recording, not really knowing how it was going to go and where the conversation was going to lead us. But what I can say is that while we absolutely did not solve the world's problems, we had a great conversation on what the problems are, admitting we know those problems, and it's a start at this point. And I can't thank Jornay and Tutuli for coming out here enough to talk with us, and of course David, Phil, and Ben, you coming out as well. So I feel like we had a great conversation to really just kind of get the main conversation going, and hopefully to inspire others as well.
And I want to second that. I want to thank everybody for being here and speaking from the heart. And we all know our passion is for children and to change lives. And, you know, we're at the ground level to change the world. We are part of a revolution, and we get to see the army building, and that army is our students, our citizens. And we have to do our best to make them understanding of everybody and of different cultures. And we need to embed that into every single one of our lessons. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And I just want to end this talk with a story. The other day, my daughter was on her ABC mouse, doing her math and doing her readings. And she says, Daddy, come over here and see my avatar. First, I'm proud she said avatar. I mean, that's amazing. And she's 3 years old. And I went over there and she goes, look, isn't she beautiful? And I look at the avatar, and the avatar has dark brown skin, bright blonde hair, green eyes, jewelry everywhere, super red nails, and says, Daddy, isn't she beautiful? And I said, yes, honey, she's absolutely beautiful. And that is amazing, because that means she is seeing people for beauty and not for the color of their skin. So I say to you all, the children, they speak truth. And look in your kids' rooms and see, if you're a white family, is every single one of their toys white? Is every single one of their books white? Just like Ben was saying, because Sometimes unintentionally, we create biases at home. Sometimes unintentionally, we create biases in the classroom, and that leads to greater biases in our society. And each and every one of us can make a difference. You don't have to make a huge difference, but little differences end up being a huge difference. And little steps end up being a march. And we're all on that march together to make this world a better place. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I am thankful to call you all friends and to have you part of my life and part of my journey. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening to our journey. And thank you so much for being an educator and having the passion to change the world. Thank you so much.